Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to deconstruct the brutal physical and psychological components of extreme winter survival. To do this, we'll be using the fictional thriller The Mountain Tribe as our thematic guide. Now, just to be clear right up front, this isn't some story about supernatural monsters or ghosts. It's a deeply realistic, cinematic wilderness survival story where the ultimate enemy is actually extreme isolation and the hidden truths we carry with us.
Okay, picture this immersive scenario with me. You're in the modern Rocky Mountains, it's late January. A historic snowstorm has completely shut down the roads, and temperatures have plummeted to a bone-chilling -25 degrees Celsius. In our narrative, a woman traveling alone, someone who is fiercely independent but actively running from a painful past, finds herself stranded and totally unprepared. She's forced to rely on a complete stranger, this rugged mountain man, just to stay alive. Nature here isn't malicious, it's just completely and utterly indifferent. Trapped together in this dense pine forest with absolutely zero cell service, they are about to face a gauntlet of genuine, life-threatening environmental hazards.
All right, let's get into Section 1, Navigating the Complete Whiteout.
We start our survivor's journey with the very first external threat they face outside their shelter. Imagine stepping outside just to grab some firewood, and suddenly the cloud layer settles directly onto the snow surface. Everything instantly becomes an indistinguishable blend of blinding white. In these conditions, you actually experience a terrifying sense of vertigo. Why? Because the visual difference between up and down is just gone. The horizon completely vanishes. Crucial terrain features, like cliff bands, crevasses, or even a sudden change in the slope's angle, become practically invisible. Your brain simply cannot process depth without visual contrast, making a totally simple walk to the woodpile potentially lethal.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how counterintuitive survival truly is. If you try to walk straight in a flat, featureless whiteout, human physiology dictates that you will naturally start walking in circles. It's wild. So to combat this, survival experts actually recommend traveling in single file. The last person in the line acts as the navigator, holding a compass and physically steering the person at the front to keep them on a straight bearing. And to regain that lost depth perception, you toss snowballs or a bag tied to a rope ahead of you as you walk. Watching how that object lands gives your brain the visual cues it desperately needs to understand the slope of the ground right in front of you.
Moving right along to Section 2, the hidden avalanche threat.
As our characters are forced to seek a way out of the freezing forest, the threat level really escalates. They can unknowingly wander right into deadly avalanche terrain. It's a terrifying reality. Avalanches claim over 150 lives worldwide each year. But here's the craziest part. You don't even have to be standing on a steep slope to be killed by one. The National Park Service explicitly warns that avalanches can travel far downslope. This means you can be wiped out even if you are standing in seemingly safe, low-slope, non-avalanche terrain at the very bottom of a valley. For our characters, walking along a flat, frozen riverbed below a steep mountain face could literally be a fatal error.
To survive this, you absolutely have to listen to the environment. Nature actually provides red flags if you're paying attention. A sudden cracking in the snowpack, or this terrifying, hollow whumping sound beneath your boots is an immediate warning sign that the snowpack is highly unstable and the layers are creeping downhill. Heavy snowfall, like the historic blizzard in our story, adds immense weight to weak layers hidden deep below the surface. And watch the thermometer, because even a sudden rapid increase in temperature can act as a trigger, loosening the snow's grip on the mountainside. So the crucial takeaway here is that deliberate preparation is always preferable to the sheer panic of an emergency rescue. Digging a snow pit allows you to physically analyze those weak, persistent layers hidden under the surface before you commit to crossing a slope. The harrowing alternative, an emergency response using probes, shovels, and rescue sleds. And when you're completely isolated with no cell service, like our characters in the Mountain Tribe, an avalanche burial isn't just a bad situation, it is almost certain death.
Let's look at Section 3, hypothermia and the freezing point.
As our characters find their escape routes blocked, the external threats bridge into a total physiological breakdown. Think of this National Weather Service wind chill data as a terrifying countdown timer. When you combine sub-zero ambient temperatures with fierce mountain wind chills, your window for survival shrinks exponentially. At critical thresholds, exposed skin will literally freeze solid and succumb to frostbite in just 5 minutes. 5 minutes! Every single second outside searching for supplies or trying to repair a broken shelter becomes a frantic race against a ticking biological clock. Now, it is vital to distinguish between these two cold weather killers. Frostbite is localized. It's the physical freezing of tissue in your extremities, like fingers, toes, and earlobes. The skin turns pale, waxy, and goes completely numb. Hypothermia, on the other hand, is the systemic failure of your body's entire internal warming system. It starts with violent shivering, but as your core temperature drops, it leads to apathy, a glassy stare, and severely impaired judgment. In a psychological thriller setting, this is where the real tension begins. Hypothermia makes you paranoid, confused, and prone to making irrational, deadly decisions.
Okay, so if you are trying to save someone suffering from severe hypothermia, your first instinct will probably tell you to rub their freezing hands and feet, or maybe submerge them in hot water. Actually, scratch that instinct. Do not do this. If you make the common mistake of rapidly warming someone's extremities first, you ironically push a massive rush of cold, stagnant blood directly back to their heart. This can induce dangerous heart arrhythmias or send them into a fatal state of shock. You must always warm the core of the body, the chest, trunk, and abdomen first, slowly and gently.
Which brings us to Section 4, the psychology of survivors. Once the immediate physical trauma is stabilized, the journey happens entirely within the human mind. Journalist and survival expert Lawrence Gonzalez coined this brilliant term, deep survival. He studied people who lived through plane crashes, avalanches, and getting lost at sea. And what he found was that survival is far less predictable than we'd expect. The people who actually make it out alive rely on highly specific mental traits. They face their horrific reality without denial. Instead of panicking, they maintain this strange curiosity about their changing environment. And most importantly, they create small, manageable tasks, like organizing their meager supplies or repairing a bootlace, just to maintain a sense of personal agency and keep despair at bay.
Gonzalez noted a completely fascinating contrast here. Sometimes an experienced rugged hunter might perish after just a single night lost in the woods, succumbing to panic and exhaustion. Meanwhile, a 4-year-old child might miraculously survive those exact same extreme conditions. It's crazy, right? The people who look like obvious physically strong winners don't always make it. True survival requires profound mental flexibility and the ability to adapt to a terrifying new reality rather than rigidly relying on past assumptions.
And finally, Section 5, surviving the unseen burdens.
Let's see how all of this builds into our psychological climax. Because the real horror of the mountain tribe isn't the storm outside, it's the isolation inside. As our two strangers are forced to rely on each other to boil water, ration food, and stave off hypothermia, that deep isolation begins to chip away at their defenses. Believable clues start to surface: an old photograph hidden in a book, a disturbing journal entry, a piece of abandoned rescue equipment. The extreme cold and the threat of avalanches will undoubtedly destroy the body, but these hidden truths and the tragic secret from the mountain man's past will slowly destroy the fragile trust that is keeping them both alive. The final revelation totally reframes everything we know about these characters, proving that surviving guilt and grief is honestly much harder than surviving the snow.
So I want to leave you with this thought to reflect on today. We spend so much time learning how to build snow shelters, avoid avalanches, and treat frostbite, but overcoming the indifference of nature is just the very first step. Forgiving ourselves, trusting others after a betrayal, and conquering the emotional wilderness within ourselves, that is the true test of human resilience. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope it gave you a completely new perspective on what it really takes to survive.